Hello, everybody, and welcome. I just want to let you know, people that just entered, this meeting is being recorded, so you can choose to have your video on or choose to have it off. We're just going to record this first portion to make sure that we have um, kind of information and also instructions about how to use the mapping tool recorded and on our website for people to access later. Um, but since it's 6 o'clock and we're here and we're recording, I'll just dive in. I think, as people might know, the city's transitioning to district-based elections. The first election where that will take place is in 2028. But there's actually a really accelerated 90-day process that the city is doing it under. And through that process, there's a series of formal public hearings. There was one on May 5th. There'll be another one on May 19th, um, where welcome people that are joining. So there's a series of public hearings where the city council is going to discuss publicly the transition to district-based elections and solicit input from the community. Um, but part of drawing new districts, what's really important to that is public input. And so what this community workshop is focused on, and thank you to those that just joined, what this community workshop is really about is to start hearing from the community on what are key communities of interest around El Cerrito that our community thinks should be grouped together and have shared representation, for example, and offering the opportunity for community members themselves to draw potential community district boundaries for the city council to consider. And so I'm joined here by Redistricting Partners is the firm, our demographer, Paul Mitchell. We'll be walking through what is redistricting, how does this 90-day process work, what's the mapping tool we're using, how you can use it. But I just, from the city side, want to just really appreciate you all for coming, for being here, and just voice that we really do want to hear from people about what communities of interest should be featured or highlighted or thought about and discussed by the city council. And so too, where people think the boundaries, what are appropriate neighborhoods to group together, and what feels right to them in terms of where the boundaries might want to fall. So all of your input, if you do create a map, if you do submit a community of interest form, all of that will be posted not only on the website for full transparency, but shared with the city council. So the city council will review the maps that are generated by the public. And our demographer, certainly, Paul Mitchell, who's here, will review all the maps submitted by members of the public before creating any draft maps of our own. So just wanted to underscore this is really a public process, and wanting to hear from the community as these boundaries are drawn. But with that, I'll hand it over to Paul from Redistricting Partners, who can walk through more of the technicalities of the districting process and the mapping tool we're presenting.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to do a short presentation, and then I'm going to go into the mapping tool, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. So first off, thanks for coming. This is an opportunity for people who haven't really learned a lot about the districting process to learn a little bit more if they weren't at that first hearing. And then for us to actually see how the mapping tool works. I'm not actually going to draw any actual maps. That's right now for the first two hearings. We're not allowed to draw maps. It's for the public to draw maps and for us essentially to listen to the public before we actually start producing anything. But I am going to show how it works and give you some of the tools you might need to be able to go forward. So first off, the California Voting Rights Act. A lot of people, when they hear Voting Rights Act, they think of the Federal Voting Rights Act, which covers everything from redistricting to how ballots are designed, to where polling places are, to election timelines and everything like that. The California Voting Rights Act is a very specific law that is named kind of something that sounds broad, but really is something that is very, very specific. And it has to do with elections for city council, school board, counties, or whatever, whether or not they can be in an at-large election system or they have to convert to districts. In an at-large election system, some elections you'll elect 2 people, other elections you'll elect 3, but the whole agency votes on those. Under the California Voting Rights Act, if there's racially polarized voting in a community, which arguably is most communities in the state, then you have to go to districts. And in those districts, it has to be a true districted system where there's individual districts and you have to live in that district, and the only people that vote are the people in that district. And that sounds like I'm being really like hyper specific, but there are historically elections in the state where you might have 5 districts, but the whole agency votes for those 5 districts, or you have 5 areas where you have to live in the district, but the voters are citywide. So this is very specific that it has to be districts where the person has to live there, and the only voters are the voters from that district. Like Will mentioned, this process is going to be taking place pretty quickly under the California Voting Rights Act in order to facilitate the transition. But because of the deadlines of the county, when they need to have these redistricting files in, they're not going to be completed in time for the 2026 election. So the first election where we're going to have these lines is going to be the 2028 election. So these elections determine some things, and there's other things they don't determine. So they definitely determine who can run for office. You have to live in that district, and who votes in that election, which is only the people from that district. It does not have to decide how the district governs. You know, I've worked in so many cities. We've done over 100 redistrictings. And I've been in cities where if you have a concern about the sidewalk, you have to go to your council member. You're not supposed to go to other council members. I've been in cities where when you go meet with the council member in their office, they have a list of the neighborhoods that they represent on their door. Or if you go to a League of Cities conference, you'll see council members sometimes on their business cards will say, you know, I'm council member such and such from Sacramento. I represent the pocket. And they're very kind of almost territorial around their districts. There's other agencies that they say, I'm on the city council. They do citywide vision. They implement and work as a citywide elected board, and they don't treat it as much as like just representing that district. So in a legal sense, the districts only really are in effect on election day. Outside of election day, it's up to the agency to determine how they want to govern and how those district lines play into the process. When we talk about this process and redistricting, we really talk about it in 2 contexts. The first context is the idea of representation. If I'm a resident where I live and I want to go see my city council member, my county supervisor, the concept is that I should have the same ability to reach my supervisor, my council member, my school board member as somebody who lives on the other side of town. The people on the other side of town don't have, you know, one council member for every 500 people, but where I live, we have one council member for every 5,000 people. That would mean that my representative power would be weakened because I have to compete with 5,000 people to get my council members' attention, whereas somewhere else, you know, one person can be pretty important in a district with only 500 people. So the idea of equally balanced district for representation is the first principle of redistricting. The second principle is what most people commonly refer to as one person, one vote, meaning that you want to have equal voting rights. So my vote matters as much for influencing the composition of a council as somebody else's vote. We don't have a situation where on one side of town, you know, the vote is more powerful than on the other side of town. Now, a lot of times when people hear redistricting, they think that gerrymandering is synonymous with redistricting. It is not. Redistricting, and the process we're going to be using here is going to follow a lot of really kind of strict rules and process to eliminate the possibility of gerrymandering. So we cannot look at partisanship. So there cannot be a partisan gerrymandering in these boundaries. We cannot do a racial gerrymandering. Now, the Voting Rights Act has been changed nationally. There will probably be years of lawsuits to determine how that actually impacts something like a local city council redistricting. But suffice to say that the California Voting Rights Act prohibits racial gerrymandering in this process. The third one is incumbent gerrymandering, one you don't really hear as much about, but it's that kind of idea where in the old days, somebody like me would get hired. The first thing they do is get the addresses of all the political and all the incumbents, or maybe get the address of somebody that an incumbent wants to run for their seat and make sure that all those people are in their districts. Now, I have done an incumbent gerrymandering. One, there was a city in Arizona that in their charter says you cannot draw an incumbent council member out of the city council district, Mesa, Arizona. And so we had to draw the districts in like an ideal way, balancing all the correct rules. And then at the end, we had to adjust those districts so that none of the council members were drawn out of their lines. And it meant that you drew much worse districts, but we had to because that was in the city charter. And I actually encouraged them to redo their city charter for 2030, but that is not legal in California. We cannot consider where incumbents live. And so I don't know where the incumbents live, and that won't be a part of the process. Now, the rules that we're going to follow, and I'm going to go through these really quickly. We had a longer discussion about them at the council meeting if somebody wants to watch that. Districts need to be relatively equal sized. And when we show the mapping tool, we'll show how that is shown in the tool itself. What we really want is districts where the largest district and the smallest district are no more than 10% apart from each other. Districts need to be contiguous, meaning they have to be whole parts. You can't have a city council district where you have a southern area with like 600 people, and then on the other side of the city, you have another part that's disconnected that is the remainder of that district. You can't have that. Now, somebody might say, well, Paul, that's obvious, but there was actually a water district in LA where we went in to do a redistricting, and they showed us their districts, and literally they had a district that was two parts that weren't connected at all. So that districts have to be contiguous. Districts should maintain communities of interest. Now, this is probably the most important part. It's something Will mentioned. It's the most important part of this process. This is why we really want that community involvement, because we want to know where the communities of interest are. And communities of interest kind of sometimes gets used almost like too amorphous or kind of quote unquote fake, like what is a community of interest? But the reality is communities of interest can be almost anything. It's very subjective. Now, the three things that we want to see in a community of interest is one, that you can name it. So skateboarders or the people who live in the hills or the people who live in the downtown. That is something that you can name. Second thing is that it's something that you can map. So there's data to show that this is the downtown area, or there's data to show this is where the renters live, or there's data to show this is where the senior community is, or this is where the mobile home park is. So there's data to show where those communities of interest are. Because if somebody comes to me and says, I have a community of interest, it's people who believe in UFOs. That's our community of interest. I would say, great. Where do they live? And unless there's a community in El Cerrito where everybody has moved to be like a UFO community, we don't have a way to map it. So it doesn't really qualify as a community of interest. The third thing we want is something that ties that community of interest to the actions of the city council. And this is really an interesting part, because if you were involved in a school board redistricting in your community, you might have had a lot of discussion about attendance areas, where the school campuses are. Even I've done redistrictings where, like on an agricultural side of a county, they'll have a lot of like farming programs, and they say, oh, the agricultural side of the county where they're doing animal husbandry is an important community of interest. Now, I don't think in this redistricting, it's very likely we will have schools or school attendance areas or animal husbandry being a community of interest. But arguably, schools could be a community of interest if there was a connection to the city council. Like, let's say somebody said the people who go to this one school is a community of interest, or the neighborhood around a school is a community of interest. I can map it. Here's where it is. And the connection to the city council is that we've been trying to ask them to put in stop signs here and here, and we've been wanting them to put in speed bumps there and there, and they haven't done it. And so now we've drawn a connection to the city council that's different than a school board redistricting. So we can talk about it, but communities of interest is kind of the most fun part of the redistricting process. The fourth one here is that easily identifiable lines. So lines that follow major streets or rivers, or things that you can go out and see as like, oh, like I understand the two sides of the freeway. That's a kind of like makes districts easily understandable. And the last one is that districts be compact. Now, compactness in science is, the most compact shape is a sphere. So we're thinking more circles and squares and district shapes. But in the state law, they actually use more of a qualitative metric. They say that districts are compact if you have nearby populations and you're drawing the nearby populations together, and they're not compact if you're bypassing a nearby population to get a far away population. So to use my screen as the city, if we had a community over here where my hand is, and I started drawing districts like this, and then going around that community of interest and going to the other side to capture something that's on the far away, you would say, well, that's not compact because you bypass this one community of interest, this one area to go grab voters somewhere else. So when we look at it, we can look at this kind of qualitative metric and we can say, is that district drawn in a way where you're bypassing a nearby population to get a far away population? And that's the way that they wrote the state law. It's a unique California only criteria or version of the criteria. So there are other things that besides those criteria that in terms of process, I've already talked about not considering incumbents or candidates, not considering political or partisanship. You also have to hold a minimum of 5 hearings. This is not counting as one of the 5 hearings. This is in addition to the 5 hearings. And this is part of the trying to improve in public engagement. And then all this information, this hearing, every map that gets drawn is going to be put on a public website, and it's going to be public for 10 years or until the next redistricting. Here's a quick schedule of where we're at with the hearings. We had our first hearing on May 5th. The next hearing is going to be on this May 19th. The process will really get more exciting, let's say, on June 9th when all the council starts actually talking about maps. June 16th is going to be an opportunity for them to get revisions to maps and then hone down to one particular map. And then the July 7th is when they're going to vote on the maps. And then after that vote, there will be another hearing to do the second vote on those maps. But essentially that first vote on the maps and the ordinance will be kind of the end of the process. It'll be the last meeting that I attend. The last hearing is more perfunctory. So with that, I'm going to go and start showing mapping tools. Let me change my screen sharing.
And while he's doing that, I'll just chime in to say, if you have any questions or want to watch the public hearing, our website, there's a hub, elcerrito.gov/districts. That's where we're going to be posting all the draft maps, all the information about the background, the context, every presentation that's done. So I just want to encourage you, if you do still have questions, to go to elcerrito.gov/districts.
Great. Thank you, Will. So I'm at a site that is a Redistricting Partners mapping tool. It's the You Draw the Lines URL. And if I click on El Cerrito, you'll see this information about the redistricting process. We also have it in Spanish and in a simple Chinese. When we come here, we also have this listing of the hearings and workshops. We are right here at this virtual workshop. You have the ability to draw 5 districts or 4 districts because the council hasn't determined yet which structure they're going to go to. A 5 council districts, that's their normal rotating mayor, or the 4 council districts where you'd have an elected mayor either for 2 or 4 years, and then you have council members, only 4 other council members. The mayor would act like a council member in terms of their legal responsibilities, but they would be elected citywide and they'd probably have a lot more kind of ceremonial or other kind of responsibilities as the mayor. The third thing here is that you can draw just a community of interest. As maps are drawn, you'll see them here in this public gallery. The public gallery is maps that people have said, yes, I want to share this. The works in progress are maps where they've fiddled and they want to just save it as a work in progress and maybe come back to it later. The public gallery is the one we're going to actually post and treat as draft maps. The works in progress, that's kind of a catch-all for people's kind of like interim map. So that's not going to be actually treated as a submission to the council. I'm going to first show how the community of interest map goes. Then I'm going to show some of the tools on the mapping. And then I'm going to switch cities. Rather than drawing your city and trying to like put into people's heads like what I think the line should look like or something, we're going to go to another city so I can be more involved and show all the tools and actually draw a full, complete city council plan. Now, first off, the community of interest function is if there is in the city something that you really want to make sure the council is paying attention to, like the elementary school or the high school or the senior center or a very dangerous intersection or, you know, something that should be a part of the redistricting process, then you can use this tool to identify and color in a community of interest, or to create a place, like literally put a dot on something and say, this is a dot for a park, and you can name it. And then you can save this as a map of communities of interest. So I'll do more examples of this in the other city. I just don't want to kind of predispose people to what I think the communities of interest should be or something. Now, when I came in here, I went to the 4 council districts, and then there's also the 5. You notice with 5 council districts, it tells you right here that the ideal population of a council district is 5,200. When we're in the 4 council district option, the ideal council district size is 6,500. When you're drawing lines, you just click on the little paintbrush, and that allows you to color things, and I'll show how that works on the other city. You also can click on the magnifying glass, and you can hover over any of these census blocks to see what the population is of that census block. You'll see some of these things have really weird shapes. It's like this census block has got a, let me just go down here like this to 1. That census block has got a weird shape. It also has 539 people, which is kind of a lot of people. These census blocks down here are more like square and easy and more reasonable and normal shape. But then you get kind of weird shaped census blocks sometimes based, and we have no control over that. We have to use these census blocks as the kind of building blocks of the redistricting. When you draw districts, you'll also have the ability to show data. So like, see how I said that this census block had 539 people and that seemed like a lot? It looks like it's probably the most populated census block because when I shade by population, it shows that as being the most dense. I could also shade by the Latino population or by the Asian population, just to kind of give a sense. Now, below that, I have this thing called citizen voting age population that I can show. So citizen voting age population, if I show Asian or Latino or Black, what it is showing is citizen voting age population, CVAT. Think of it as eligible voters. It's people over 18 and citizens. And that data is used to comprise, when somebody says, well, what percentage of this district is Latino? We talk about it in a voting, that one person, one vote context. When somebody says how many people are in a district, we talk about it in this context, which is the decennial population data from the census, so total population. So at the end of drawing districts, like I'll show you in the other plan, you'll get to see the breakdown of your districts based on different demographics, as well as being able to just see the total number. And there will be some other features that I can show here in a moment. When you're drawing districts, you can draw districts and then just change the color to go to the next district. And we'll go back here just to the map gallery to get started again. So let me go ahead and show how to draw districts using the city of Sonoma. This city also had a 4-district and 5-district option. You'll see that this district is 10,000 people, so it's half your size. Before we get started, I'm going to show how some of the population, how some of the data looks here. First off, Total population here, this city of Sonoma, I mean, maybe some of you have been there just vacationing. In the center, they have like a downtown square. Then they also have a mobile home park here on the left-hand side. And when I do show population, you're going to see that's where you have a lot of dense population. They also have, it's a very strangely shaped census block. That census block right there has 520 people, kind of like that weirdly shaped census block that you have that has the 560 people. So that is one element of the area that becomes interesting in their redistricting, because if I were to create a community of interest map here, I would probably start by saying, this is the mobile home park. And they have real issues that are related to the redistricting. They have rules for the mobile home park that are set by the city. They have different issues than the rest of the city. If you go into that mobile home park, there's lots of people driving little golf carts and so on. It's just a very different community than the rest of the city. So it's definitely kind of a community of interest. You also have, in the communities of interest thing, you have this downtown area that has like a big park and like an area you can walk around the big park and go to little stores. And so it's like a little business district as well. You also have let's say this is park, or let's say this is downtown. You also have an area up here that is kind of like this interesting area where it's got like a bike path through the whole thing. And it's like got parks and playing fields and like stuff for, kids to go play baseball and stuff like that. And a lot of the community goes up there, like locals go up there and they walk around and it's kind of outdoorsy. They also, I think, have like issues there where like if there's a wolf or something like that in this area, the city council might have to deal with that. So that's also a community of interest area. And you can go on in Sonoma and draw these different communities of interest. And then when you save it, you can go ahead and see that community of interest map down here that was saved as being public. So now anybody from the public could see my community of interest I just made for Sonoma. Let's make a districting plan now. So when we're drawing districts, we click on the paintbrush, and I'm going to start with a blue district. Now, I did the redistricting, so I kind of have a little bit of a head start. So I kind of know what these districts generally look like. But remember that area up here that I said was kind of like had the community goes hiking and walking through the area, and like there's a little bike path and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to kind of start, and with this paintbrush, I'm just dragging and painting these census blocks as I go. And see this blue bar? I want that blue bar to kind of get to this center line, and this population. Sorry, I just have a little bit of a cold. This population getting to around 2,000. So if I go ahead and keep painting, I can do this. Maybe I'll come back here and grab that one. Go like this. Get close to. Okay, so maybe that's close enough. 2,067. So remember how I said that districts have to be a total 10% deviation? The largest to the smallest needs to be within 10%. This district is 4% underpopulated. When I hover here, it says minus 3.96. So if all my districts are kind of in that range, then I'm going to be okay. So let's go to the next district. Let's go to yellow. And for the yellow district, I'm going to start at that mobile home park because I know that that's a community of interest, and the area around it's kind of a community of interest. And I'm going to come up here to the side and come up to where I drew that blue district. Now, see, I just went over population here by 8%. Now, 8% and 4%, if something's -4 and something's +8, that's a 12 percentage point difference. And see down here where it says deviation, 12.03, that means that my largest and smallest districts are 12% apart. That's too much. I can do two things. One is I can add to this blue district. Now this blue district is off by literally 2.2 people. This total plan deviation now is 0 deviation here, and 8% there. So now I'm back within 10%. I could also, when I draw my next district, come in here and I could take away like that census block. Now this district's down to 2293. Now it's down to 2207. Now it's 2186. Now the plan deviation is really tiny between these two districts. And now I need to draw this green district. And I'm literally just using like a paintbrush and going and grabbing this new district. Oh, I kind of shot over it, huh? Kind of shot over that number. Let's go and do the next one. I'll maybe take this. Oh, that's messy right there. That's not gonna work. I'll draw the last district here. And as I'm doing this, I'm thinking about like, what are the communities of interest here? If I click this button that says highlight unassigned units, it's going to show me the areas that haven't been given a district, these little hanging off parts, not too much. I'm just going to clean this up. This city has 2 islands, which aren't actually islands because we're not in the middle of the ocean, but it's when a city jurisdiction has like a property that's outside of its actual city boundaries. You don't have islands in El Cerrito, but like I think one of these is like a waste management facility that the city owns. So they have ownership of those. So we have to draw them into a district. Now my districts are still 15% deviation. So I'm going to have to do something to clean these up. I need to add to the purple, and I can take from either these 2 greens to get myself there. So if I add to the purple, I could do something like this. That added to the purple. And if I wanted to add to the purple and take from this one as well, I could do something like that too. So now I've drawn districts. This unassigned population here is at 0. My total planned population is 6%. I have, as far as I can tell, drawn every single census block here. So we're all done. And let's look at what we have. When I go to data layers, that's just the shading. Let's go ahead and do the evaluation. When I go to evaluation, I can see each of these districts and its percentage white, Hispanic, and Asian. And I can change this up here. And in citizen voting age population, I can see these breakdowns as well here. And I can see it for each district. So one of my districts is 21.7% Latino, this district number 1 up here, this blue one. Now, there's a couple of things I can do at this point. One, I could just close it and nobody ever sees this. It's gone. The other thing I can do is I can save it, and I can save to work in progress, which means it's not actually being published to the city. It's not going to be a draft map they're considering. Or I can share it. And when I share it, I can give it a name. I can say what my description of my plan is. This plan keeps mobile home park with nearby community and keeps downtown together. Whatever it is that is my like justification for my maps. I can also put my name, or I can leave it blank. The naming of maps is optional. If you want to, you could put something like, you could leave it blank, or you could put something like, I could put Paul Mitchell, not the hairstylist, or whatever I want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and submit this map. Up here also, if you copy to clipboard, that copy to clipboard created a link that I can actually just share with anybody. So I don't see the chat here, but I could put that link into the chat, or I could just email that to somebody. Now I'm going to share to gallery, and there's some extra options here that are new. One is I can now email this map. So if I click email, you don't see it, but an email browser window just opened up on my side. And it says, I drew a redistricting plan, check it out here, and it has the link. I can also post it on X. And here I've got a new tweet. It says, I drew a redistricting plan, check it out here. And it's a link to the plan. And I can add whatever I want to say in this message so that I can tweet out and try to get the public to, go check out my map. I can stay on this map and keep working on it, or I can go back to the map gallery. Now, one of the things about the map gallery is I just created this workshop plan. Let's say one of you go right now to the city council, to the you draw the lines and whatever. You could open this up and you can make changes. So like, see this seat, this one that's a 4-district plan. I could come in here and I could make changes to this plan and say, oh, I really want to do this plan, but I live over here and I want to be in the district with this thing. And I've just made this one change. It's still within 10%. Also, there's unassigned population. I'm going to fix that up. I'm going to clean this plan up, and I'm going to make this plan even better. And now I've taken a plan that was somebody else's plan, and I've made changes to it. And I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to call this better plan. And I'm going to go ahead and save it. So now when I come back here, we have my workshop plan I did, and we have this better plan. And this better plan is just a recreation of this ID 15 or this one down here. But what that's to say is that if Linda draws the best plan ever, but then Catherine comes back the next week and she's like, well, I think I want to change that plan. Catherine can just open up Linda's plan and then save it with a different name. It won't let her overwrite the plan that's there, but it'll allow her to use that as a starting point. And what will happen is that we'll have the public submitting plans in the gallery. Then we're going to have a section here called draft plans. When we have the consultant drawn plans and any plans that the city council is considering, we'll have those in a different section. And when the redistricting is done, we'll have a section for the adopted plan. So this is all a publicly available tool. Anybody can go to it. It is intended for us to have the building blocks to present to the city council options for districting plans. One other thing I want to mention is you don't have to draw an entire plan. And it's legitimate for somebody to come in here and say 5-district council plan, and they live in the mobile home park, and all they draw is, what they want to have be the mobile home park district. And they save it. And they name it mobile home park. And they can even write in here, I don't care. I don't care about the rest of the seats. I want this one. And when they save this, that is a public submission. It doesn't have to be complete. It doesn't have to be balanced. It doesn't have to be contiguous. Anything that somebody wants to submit can be considered part of the public input, and it can be valuable. Sometimes something like this, where somebody just draws one district, sometimes that's the most valuable input, because everybody then all of a sudden says either I do want or I don't want that one district. And it makes it easier for us to consider other plans that have a construction like this for that one district. So anything somebody submits is kind of fair game. There's never a time where, with rare exception, there's never a time when we look at a redistricting plan and we say, well, the council, this has no value. I have seen a redistricting plan where somebody drew a Mickey Mouse. So that isn't generally something I would suggest, but outside of cartoon characters, anything that somebody submits can be valuable in the hearing process. Unless Will has a question or if somebody else has a question, I think that's the basics, and I'm happy to give a pause there and see if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, and Charles, it looks like you have your hand raised. I think we're going to end the recording here so that we can be more informal and then post this on the website. But just to say, we really do want, as the city, want to have hear from you and have maps be submitted and community of interest forms so that when Paul and his team go to draw the first drafts for council consideration, they're really well informed by public input. So thank you all for coming.